Hey, I'm Pal, and this video, as you can see from the title, is about a very interesting case that I've wanted to tell you about for a long time, so I hope you enjoy it. Natasha Ryan was born in Rockhampton, Australia. She lived with her family, which included her parents, her younger brother Chris, who was 6 years old, and her older sister Donna. Natasha was stressed and overwhelmed. Her parents were going through a divorce, she had problems at home, and her grades were bad. She couldn't concentrate at school, kept getting into trouble, and was suspended several times. She said she was going through a really tough time, and at that moment, she was angry at everything and everyone. She didn't want to be at school, she didn't like being at home either, so she really didn't have anywhere to be. She didn't want that life. Natasha disappeared in August 1998 when she was just 14 years old. I want to emphasize that before Natasha disappeared this time, she had already run away from home a couple of times, maybe 2 or 3 times. Always with the help of her boyfriend Scott Black, who was 22 years old, and who actually met Natasha because he was dating her older sister. I don't understand why her parents allowed this relationship. First, because he was her sister's ex, and second, and much more importantly, he was 22 years old when she was only 14. She was a child and he was an adult. I don't know why they allowed this, but the point is that every time Natasha ran away, it was with Scott's help, but she always showed up the next day or 2 days later. Honestly, her parents weren't really worried because in a way they knew she was with him, but everything was different the time she disappeared on August 31st, 1998, because she never came back. That morning, her mom took her to school. Natasha hugged her tightly and told her she loved her. Hours later, she was reported missing. She hadn't been seen at school, no one knew where she was, not even her boyfriend Scott knew where she was, and the police started to get really worried because, as I mentioned, Natasha would usually disappear, but this time it was different. She didn't take any clothes, she didn't take any of her belongings, she didn't take any money, and she wasn't with Scott, so no one knew where she could be. On top of that, there were rumors that there was some kind of serial killer in the area, since several girls and young women had disappeared. What was mysterious was that many of them looked like Natasha and had even disappeared in the same way, near the school. The case became huge. Everyone in the community was looking for Natasha, and the officers took special measures. There were more than 100 people working on the case's phone line. There were more patrol cars. Overall, they increased surveillance and spent around $400,000 of taxpayer money just on the search for Natasha. But after all that searching, there were no clues about Natasha. Several years went by and Natasha still hadn't turned up. There were no leads about her. It really seemed like she had vanished. The police thought that, unfortunately, she had become another victim of this serial criminal, since it was unlikely they would find her. They questioned her boyfriend several times, but he wasn't a suspect since he said he didn't know anything about her. The police thought it was unlikely that Natasha was still alive, since several years had passed and no one knew anything about her. She wasn't with her boyfriend, she wasn't with her friends, she wasn't with her family, she had no money and nowhere to go, so the chances were very slim. Besides, if she were alive, someone would have already seen her. Everyone in the community was looking for her. There were posters of her everywhere. I can't imagine all the pain they went through. But after 3 years, when it would have been Natasha's 17th birthday, her family decided to hold a sort of funeral for her so they could say goodbye. Shortly after, they arrested the man believed to be responsible for Natasha's disappearance and that of the other girls. His name is Leonard Fraser. Leonard is known for being one of the most dangerous criminals in all of Australia. He was arrested for the death of a girl who was only 9 years old, but as soon as he was arrested, he began to confess to many other crimes and many other victims. When the police went to his house to investigate, they found several ponytails that he collected, which he would cut from his victims and keep as souvenirs. They found so many ponytails that they were able to identify other girls who had been his victims. And to this day, not all the victims whose hair was found in his house have been identified. Natasha's hair was not in this house, but he saw a photo of her and said that she had indeed been one of his victims and that she was no longer alive. Natasha's family was devastated, but in a way, they had been preparing themselves for this. They knew it was a possibility and had lost hope of finding her. Leonard's trial began, which lasted quite some time since there were multiple victims. On April 10th, 2003, the police received an anonymous tip that said Natasha Ryan is okay and she is alive. You can find her here. And they mentioned an address and a phone number. The police immediately went to the address. It was a house located just 5 minutes from Natasha's family home. They entered the house and at first thought it was empty, so they started searching room by room, until they reached the master bedroom, and when they opened the closet, they found Natasha hiding there, 5 years later. Exactly the same week that Leonard was going to be sentenced for Natasha's death, they found her. She was hiding in the house of Scott Black, her boyfriend. At first, they thought Scott had kidnapped her, but Natasha was there of her own free will. The police took Natasha and did not immediately return her to her family. In fact, her family wasn't able to see her until the next day, April 11th, 2003, when they were in the middle of Leonard's trial. Her parents were there because he was being tried for Natasha's death. Then, in the middle of the trial, the prosecutor stands up and says Leonard didn't kill Natasha because Natasha is alive. Natasha's dad literally collapsed to the floor from the shock. Natasha had to testify about her own supposed death. She said she had never seen Leonard in her life, that he had never hurt her, and that obviously she was still alive. Then she went on to tell everything that had happened during the 5 years she had disappeared. She said that it all started days before and that she began planning it with the help of her boyfriend Scott, but at first Scott didn't want to do it. He didn't want to help her, although she insisted so much that eventually he agreed. They arranged to meet in an alley near the school. Scott was a milkman, so he hid her in his truck and took her to his house. For the first 4 years, Natasha was hidden in Scott's house, which was located 45 minutes from her family's home. She couldn't go out for obvious reasons, so she spent all day, every day, locked up in the house for 4 years. And every time Scott had visitors or some of his friends came over, she had to hide in the closet. Natasha learned how to sew because she needed clothes. And if Scott bought clothes for a teenage girl, obviously it would look mysterious or suspicious, and she couldn't go to school either, but she studied German online. Natasha didn't see the sun for 5 years. Even when she was already inside the house, she had to close the curtains so no one could see anything. So the only time she could go out were when she asked Scott to take her to the beach. And this only happened like 2 or 3 times. It was something sporadic, not something she usually did. A year before she was found, Scott had to move for work and rented a house, which was just 5 minutes away from Natasha's family's house. So now Natasha had to be even more careful. She couldn't look out the windows and definitely couldn't go outside, even at night. This was the house where they found her hiding in the closet. To this day, no one knows who gave the anonymous tip, since the only people who knew where Natasha was were her and Scott. She said she tried to contact her family several times. She would call home but wouldn't say anything. She couldn't speak. She was afraid to go back home because she thought they'd put her in jail. She was scared of the consequences because her lie kept getting bigger and bigger. She said it was like a snowball that grew quickly, because at first she had just run away from home. She didn't think it would have so many consequences, but then her family thought she was dead. Then someone was arrested for her death. So she already felt really trapped. She didn't know what to do. Basically, she was scared because everything got out of control. She also clarified that she was hiding of her own free will, and that Scott never forced her to do anything or mistreated her. She spent 5 years locked away, which affected her a lot. She was pale from not having been out in the sun for 5 years, and she was also malnourished. And shortly after being found, she became seriously ill. Something that really surprised me is that no one questioned her mental health. They didn't do any tests or anything to find out how she was mentally. I mean, she didn't seem like a very stable person when she ran away, and I can't imagine how her health could have gotten worse from being locked up for so long, especially since the only person she could talk to was Scott. People were angry with Natasha and with Scott for what they did, for lying, and because the government spent hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars searching for her, only to find out that the whole time she was with her boyfriend. They were so angry with them that they asked the authorities to press charges. In 2005, Scott was sentenced to 3 years in prison for giving a false statement, since during Leonard's trial in 2002, a year before Natasha was found, Scott said he had no idea where Natasha was. And yes, Leonard is a horrible person who deserves to go to prison, but they were blaming him for something he didn't do, and that's wrong. They gave Scott 3 years in prison, but later reduced the sentence to just 12 months. I find it strange that Scott wasn't charged for, 1, hiding her for so many years, and 2, having a relationship with an underage girl. It's like everyone was okay with it. I don't understand why. I don't know if it's because it was the 90s or early 2000s, but even so, I still find it strange. The point is that the public started to sympathize with him after he told his side of the story. He said he didn't want to help her, that he wanted her to seek help, but she refused. She even manipulated and threatened him, saying that if he didn't do it, she would take her own life. And yes, he was worried about her because she had a history of self-harm. Natasha went back to her mom's house, but Jenny, Natasha's mom, said she didn't trust her and that it would be very hard to trust her again after what happened. She also said she would never forgive her. People in the community were very angry with Natasha because they raised $400,000 to find her, only for her to end up safe with her boyfriend. They were so upset that they asked her to return the $400,000. Natasha couldn't do it. She was a 19-year-old girl who didn't have a job, didn't have an education. Where was she supposed to get that kind of money? But even so, they pressed charges and she had to pay $1,000. Of course, $1,000 is nothing compared to $400,000, but I guess it's something. I don't know, I think they shouldn't have demanded this money from her because she was 14 years old when she disappeared or ran away from home. She wasn't thinking clearly, she was just a girl and she didn't like her life. I think people are being really hard on her, but that's just my opinion. Natasha did several interviews, including a long one for which she was paid $200,000. When people found out about this, they were furious with Natasha and were demanding that she return this money to the community. Although it was just people demanding it, not any authority. So she simply paid the $1,000 and didn't give any more money. After that, they lived a pretty normal and private life. Natasha lived with her mom until Scott got out of prison a year later. When he got out, they moved in together, had a child, and got married in 2008. They had a small wedding, invited only a few people, trusted friends and family, and told them they couldn't take a single photo. Although they did take photos themselves and later sold them to a magazine for $200,000. By the way, I forgot to mention that Leonard was sentenced to life in prison and died in prison in 2007. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is a very interesting case, and I was really surprised while reading about it. It definitely didn't end the way I thought it would. Still, I really liked it, and I hope you all enjoyed it too.